Okay, class, we are still in the topic of extinguishment of obligation, and the second mode is the loss of the thing due. Okay, we have been discussing in our previous lessons that this is very important when it comes to obligation to give, whether a determinate or a generic thing. Okay, we have been discussing about the principle of genus non quam perit. So if the thing to be delivered is a generic thing or an indeterminate thing, the loss thereof, even if with attendance of the fortuitous event, will not extinguish the obligation because the genus cannot perish. You can still get another thing of the same kind and value to be delivered to the debtor in lieu of the one that was lost. But this is very important class kaming loss of the thing due when it comes to delivery of determinate thing. Because if a determinate thing is lost without mora, dolo, culpa, especially in the case of fortuitous event, then the obligation to deliver will be extinguished. So a thing is considered lost when, number one, when it perishes. Siyempre, if disintegrate siya from this world, it perishes, then it is considered lost. When it goes out of commerce, okay, it disappears in such a way that its existence is unknown or it cannot be recovered. Obvious na class. So when is a loss of a thing will distinguish an obligation to give? The thing must be specific or determinate. Okay. Walang culpa, dolo, mora in the performance of the obligation, especially in the event of fortuitous event. Then the thing that is lost cannot anymore be recovered, in which case the obligation will be extinguished. So when is a loss of the thing will not extinguish the obligation to give? Of course, when the law provides, okay, example, Article 1117 and 1165, when stipulated by the parties, when the nature of the obligation requires the assumption of risk, when the obligation to deliver is a specific thing arises from a crime. Okay? Kani sa class 1, 2, 3, 4, na-discuss na natin sa una dito sa distinction nato sa determinate, generic, specific, and indeterminate na mga things. Okay, na-discuss na natin eh. I-review na lang na. So in an obligation to deliver a generic thing, as I said before, the loss of the destruction of the thing of the same kind does not extinguish the obligation. Why? Because of the principle of genus non quam perit. So what if partial lang ang loss? Partial lang ang loss class. Dili totally lost ang thing. So the party, of course, may agree on a compromise. Okay? Bahala na sila mag-agree kung okay ba o hindi or cancel na lang. In case of disagreement, they can always go to court for the court to determine whether the partial loss is so important as to extinguish the obligation. So whenever the thing is lost in the possession of the debtor, it shall be presumed lang kasi disputable presumption, that the loss was due to his fault. Why? Because nawala sa iyang possession. So there is a disputable presumption na the cause of the loss is the fault of the debtor. Then because this is a disputable presumption, the debtor can always prove na it was not his fault. So this presumption will not apply in case of earthquake, flood, storm, or other natural calamity. Of course, because of this calamities will 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 uh, will dismantle the disputable presumption that the debtor is at fault, because these calamities will be presumed to be the cause of the loss. So the debtor in obligations to do shall also be released when the prestation becomes legally or physically impossible without the fault of the obligor. Let's say, for example, you are obliged to paint a house. Then later on, pinagbawal ang nagkaroon ng batas. Example lang, na bawal na mag-paint ng house because harmful ang paint siguro, ganun. Okay? Because of that, it becomes impossible for the debtor to perform his obligation to do, in which case, it is considered pa rin na loss of the thing. Nawala na yung obligation niya to paint the house because it has become illegal. So the impossibility of performance is the same as loss of a thing. Hence, the obligation will also be extinguished. So there are kinds of impossibility. Class number 1 is the physical impossibility. Pag naging impossible na talaga physically, that is physical impossibility. Legal impossibility, class naging impossible lang siya because of law. The law itself says that it's illegal already, so you cannot do it. Even if physically you can do it, but legally it becomes impossible. So when the service has also become so difficult, ano siya class obligation to do? To be manifestly beyond the contemplation of the parties, the obligor may also be released therefrom in whole or in part. Okay. Here there is an external element of fortuitous event. So of course, pag may fortuitous event, and then naging difficult to be performed, then the obligor or the debtor may be released from the obligation. So when a debt of a thing, certain and undeterminate thing, proceeds from a criminal offense, the debtor shall not be exempted from the payment of his price, whatever may be the cause of the loss, unless the thing having been offered by him to the person who should receive it, the latter refuse without justification to accept it. Taas kayo, example na lang taon. Si D, gikawat niya ang cellphone ni C. Therefore, D has the obligation to return the cellphone. Okay? The obligation of D arises from his criminal act of stealing. So even if the cellphone was destroyed without the fault of D, he is still liable for the payment of the price. Except when C is in mora accipiende. Okay. Kapag balik na ni D ang cellphone, di na tinanggap ng C, and then later on nawala, then D can claim extinguishment of the obligation because of the loss of the thing due, even if the obligation arises from a criminal act. Of course, hindi pwede prosecute for stealing the cellphone of C. So the obligation having been extinguished by the loss of the thing, the creditor shall have all the rights of action which the debtor may have against third persons by reason of the loss. Okay? So, si debtor will be free from fulfilling the obligation because of the loss of the thing, but the creditor can go after those third person, who may have been the reason of the loss. Example, D is obliged to deliver to C a specific laptop, and then the laptop was lost due to the fault of X. Si X ang may kasalanan. In this case, D was not at fault, so hindi na siya obliged to perform the obligation. The obligation is already extinguished. But C can go after X because X was the reason for the loss of the laptop. The loss of the laptop.